Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something I think is just universal. It's that relentless internal hum.
That never-stopping stream of consciousness.
Exactly, that constant whir of worrying about something you did last week, planning next month's budget, or just feeling this low-grade craving for something else, anything.
Well, that ceaseless mental movement, that feeling of the mind being, expensive, that's our entire focus for this deep dive.
Right.
We've pulled together a stack of sources from evolutionary psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and even neurochemistry. And they're all asking the same basic question. What are the mechanisms behind this constant churning?
Yeah.
And how does the mind actually let go?
Our sources are going to take us right into the machinery of the brain. We're talking about the default mode network, the role of the insula.
And even these really intense states you see in meditation and with psychedelics, all viewed through this lens of how the brain builds and then sometimes dissolves our sense of self.
And that gets to the core paradox, doesn't it? If a quiet mind feels so good, why is our default state so anxiety-prone and so metabolically costly?
And the answer is pretty brutal. Evolution did not prioritize your psychological comfort.
Yeah.
It prioritized survival. The systems that create this constant thinking were just incredibly good at keeping our ancestors alive.
Okay, let's unpack that evolutionary mandate then, because that constant worrying we all complain about, it's actually rooted in one of humanity's greatest achievements.
It is. You're talking about mental time travel. MTT.
Mental time travel. So it's exactly what it sounds like.
Pretty much. It's the cognitive ability to build these really detailed mental scenarios of the future threats, opportunities, and then, and this is the crucial part, plan your actions right now based on that future.
So like, I'm not thirsty right now, but I'm making sure I have drinks for next week's party. That's it.
That's MTT in action. And it's the sheer flexibility and scale of it that sets us apart. We see in the research that most other animals, they can delay gratification for a few seconds, maybe minutes at best.
But humans, we plan days, weeks, even decades out.
The scale is absolutely crucial. And, to prove it was genuine MTT, scientists like Suddendorf and Corballis, they had to use these really strict criteria.
To rule out just like basic learning.
Exactly. Novel problems, single trials, different contexts. And when you apply those rules, you just realize how immense our capacity for foresight really is.
And this is where the survival advantage just becomes monumental. This foresight, it allows for something the researchers call deliberate practice.
Yes. And deliberate practice is the absolute key to shaping your future self.
Okay, but deliberate practice sounds very modern, like practicing piano or learning to code. What did that actually look like for, an early hominin?
That's a great question. Think about creating a complex stone tool. That's a multi-step abstract process. Or think about tracking an animal for days. You're predicting its movements, but you're also predicting how you need to coordinate with your group a week from now.
Wow.
They had to think ahead on these long timelines, weeks, months, years, to train themselves. And this allowed the species to flexibly specialize. We became rapid specialists, adapting to new climates way faster than natural selection could ever manage on its own.
Yeah, that explains the planning side. But it doesn't really explain the worrying. Why does it feel so anxious all the time? Why am I worried about taxes I filed 3 months ago?
That's the psychological cost, and it's perfectly explained by something called the smoke detector principle.
The smoke detector principle.
Right. Our brain is fundamentally biased toward fear. So think of a smoke detector designed for survival. It's going to be wildly oversensitive. The cost of a false alarm, a bit of extra anxiety, some needless worry is pretty low.
You lose some sleep. You feel stressed.
But the cost of missing a real threat, the actual fire, is catastrophic. It's death. So the brain is just designed to prefer the tiny cost of a false alarm over the huge cost of missing a real threat.
So our anxiety is just a side effect.
It's the side effect of an incredibly successful but really oversensitive survival machine. Historically, the drive to initiate craving and thinking had to be extremely strong. You couldn't afford to be complacent.
And this chronic mental movement connects right to the system we call stress. We hear about good stress, bad stress, but this constant low-grade modern anxiety, it doesn't really feel like either one.
Well, stress itself is an ancient, essential adaptation. It detects threats and mobilizes a response through the HPA axis. Optimal health needs eustress, good stress, that's motivating. Then you have distress, bad stress, which is overwhelming.
But our sources point to a third state, Sus-stress.
Yes, sus-stress. It's fascinating. It's inadequate stress. It's when you know you should be responding to a chronic, bad situation, like a terrible job, but you just can't muster the energy.
It's burnout.
It's a kind of chronic inadequate mobilization, and it seriously impairs normal functions. It's the grinding result of that smoke detector just going off 247 for years with no real fire to fight.
So if evolution wired us this way, where in the brain does this constant chatter actually live? Let's get into the architecture.
Right. So we shift now to the neural machinery, and we have to talk about the infamous default mode network, the DMN.
The DMN. This is the star player in the whole mental movie, isn't it?
Absolutely. The continuous activity of the DMN, it correlates directly with that feeling of a mind that just cannot stop thinking.
The mind wandering.
The mind wandering, the rumination, fantasizing about the future. It's the brain's default state when you're not focused on the outside world. And we should remember this idea that the brain is always busy, even at rest. That's not new. It goes back nearly a century.
And the DMN isn't just one spot, right? It's a network. It has these major hubs that basically build our experience of who we are.
That's exactly right. You've got the posterior cingulate cortex, the PCC, and the precuneus. These regions are central. They combine your attention with memory and perception. They're deeply involved in self-related tasks.
So the PCC is like the anchor for my life story.
You could think of it that way. It's where you get caught up or sort of attached to the identifying features of your conceptual self.
Yeah.
And then you have the medial prefrontal cortex, the MPFC.
The decision maker.
It's the decision maker in that self-processing leap. It helps recall autobiographical memories and, critically, construct those future goals we were talking about. So if the DMN is highly active, you are just caught up in your own story.
It sounds like there are two different versions of me competing for attention here.
That's a perfect way to put it. Neuroscience actually categorizes the self into two primary concepts. First, you have the narrative self, the me self.
That's the DMN's job.
That's what the DMN runs on. It's the self that stretches across time, the one with the history and identity, future plans. It's the one prone to rumination.
And the second one. This is the key to escape, right? The experiential self.
The I self. This is your first-person perception, pure moment-to-moment awareness. It's your sense of embodiment and agency, who you are right now in this present moment, separate from your story. And this I self is intrinsically linked to a crucial brain structure called the insula.
Okay, the insula. This sounds like the anchor we need to pull us out of that endless DMN loop.
Yeah.
What makes it so powerful for grounding us?
The insula is a central hub, a sort of traffic cop for information. It connects everything, but its key function here is processing interoception.
Interoception, so the stream of information from inside my body.
Exactly. Your heart rate, your breath, temperature, that feeling in your gut. It's not just sensing your heartbeat, it's bringing that raw, non-conceptual data into your conscious awareness.
And that grounds you.
Precisely. When you enhance interoceptive awareness, you are literally grounding the self in the present moment. You shift focus away from abstract self-related thinking, that's DMN activity, toward immediate sensory processing. It gives the experiential self dominance over the narrative self.
Okay, so if the DMN is the engine of mental movement and the insula is the anchor for the present, how do we actively force that engine to turn off? There has to be an opposing force.
There is, and that opposing force is the Central Executive Network, or CEN.
Right.
The CEN includes areas like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and it's responsible for external attention-demanding tasks. Solving a puzzle, driving, focusing on a problem at work. And in a healthy brain, the CEN and the DMN are typically anti-correlated.
So when one is up, the other's down.
Exactly. When the DMN is running its internal movie, the CEN is quiet, and vice versa.
And the research seems to show that practices like meditation are essentially training the CEN to become the DMN's editor.
That's a great way to put it. The data shows two kinds of changes in regular meditators. First, there's a long-term trait change. Experienced meditators, or EMs, show a significant long-term reduction in activity within the DMN. Their mind is just structurally quieter at baseline.
But then during the actual act of meditating, the state effect, the CEN seems to actively step in and silence the chatter. How do we measure that?
They use a measure called positive diametric activity, or PDA, and PDA tracks the difference in activity between the CEN and the DMN. When people are actively achieving stillness, their PDA goes way up.
Meaning the CEN's activity is becoming significantly greater than the DMN's.
Yes. It suggests the CEN is actively inhibiting the DMN's ruminative hubs. So if the DMN is the narrator, the CEN is the editor grabbing the remote and pausing the documentary.
That's a perfect analogy.
Hmm.
And that's the proposed mechanism for the well-being and sense of control that meditators report. You're literally teaching the executive system how to inhibit the default story.
But this act of inhibition, it sounds exhausting. Doesn't fighting the DMN all the time use a ton of energy?
It does. Which is why stillness is so valuable from an evolutionary biology perspective. This links back to the brain-body energy conservation model. All that compulsive cognitive simulation, it's metabolically costly. The brain uses 20% of the body's energy.
So stillness is a biological return to center. It's a profound shift toward homeostatic efficiency. You're conserving vital resources by suppressing these energy-intensive, low-priority processes like chronic rumination.
It's not just psychological comfort, it's biological efficiency.
Yeah.
And you feel this shift neurochemically too.
Absolutely. When the system quiets down, the neurochemistry changes. You see an increase in GABA, which is the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. It helps quiet all that noisy neuronal firing.
Serotonin.
Increase serotonin. It promotes emotional stability, helps you detach from that internal story. And maybe most importantly, the dopamine system stabilizes.
Which reduces that feeling of wanting.
Yes. That constant seeking and craving that drives so much of our mental movement. When that compulsion quiets down, the whole system just recalibrates toward contentment.
This brings us to the final and maybe deepest step of letting go. Dissolving the very foundation of the noise, which is the self-model itself.
Right. If we see the brain as a prediction machine, which is a popular model.
The predictive coding model.
Yes. It's constantly generating models or priors about the world and craving, anxiety, compulsive thinking. A lot of that comes from the brain trying to reduce free energy, which is just a technical term for uncertainty or surprise. It's trying to make incoming data match its existing models, and updating those models is uncomfortable.
And our continuous, unified sense of self is the ultimate high-level model.
It is the brain's highest level cognitive hypothesis, and it takes a massive amount of effort to maintain. This model relies on self-binding, preferentially enhancing connections for self-relevant information to create this inference of a simple, single, persisting entity.
The feeling that there's a single me in here who owns all my thoughts and feelings.
Exactly, and when people report ego dissolution, which is famously linked with high-dose psychedelics, what they're experiencing is a temporary breakdown of that self-binding mechanism.
So it's a phenomenon of unbinding.
It's unbinding. The chemical action of certain compounds seems to relax the precision weighting of those highest level priors. Our deepest beliefs about who we are, the coherence of the self-model degrades, and you become acutely aware that the unified self you feel every day is just a modeling process. It's a highly effective illusion built for survival.
So it's not some spiritual magic, it's the brain consciously suspending its own most rigid assumption.
That's it. The self is revealed as a model, not a fixed thing. And that unbinding, that softening of fixed assumptions, is linked to profound psychological insight.
Which is what researchers call the mechanics of insight.
By relaxing confidence in those rigid, high-level assumptions, you promote this tremendously open, inquiring state of mind. It facilitates something called fact-free learning.
Fact-free learning, so you get a fresh perspective without any new data.
Exactly. You're just stripping away the unnecessary complexity of your old, redundant models. This process, Bayesian model reduction, lets simpler, more elegant solutions emerge. It's the neurological basis of the aha moment.
This has been a phenomenal journey, from the evolutionary need to worry right down to the neurochemistry of true conscious stillness.
We've seen that the mind's constant movement is an evolutionary success story, linked to mental time travel and the anxiety bias of that smoke detector principle.
And that the neural mechanism is the DMN, or internal narrator, which can be actively inhibited by the CEN, or internal editor, through practice.
And ultimately, that the most profound way to let go involves recognizing the self as a high-level hypothesis, a model, and that temporarily suspending that model can allow for transformative, fact-free insight.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. If your continuous sense of self is merely a high-level cognitive prediction, designed to minimize surprise and promote survival, how flexible can you make that model? And what new psychological potentials open up when you consciously choose to temporarily suspend that hypothesis?